And we're live. What's up, Alex?
Hey, hey, how we doing?
Oh, good, man.
It
Good.
is it Thursday? It's getting late in the week already, and this week has gone by fast.
I seriously, and I bet a bunch of people are just getting back from IT Nation yesterday. So
Oh yeah,
sure,
secured. Yeah,
sure,
probably
no
missing a few birds
hangovers.
still traveling.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I'm just thinking in my head, I saw so many people having a good time. I saw our boy Wes killed it.
I had a lot of
That guy's
FOMO
so
for
cool.
this event. I do every year, and I never go to this one for some reason. But it's always a good crew and looks like a good time.
And I love how it's evolving, right? Because it started off as Automation Nation, right? I remember going in like 2015, twenty
Yep.
sixteen, and really was the tactical, right? It got away from the hypothetical nature sometimes that business strategy gets into.
Well, and it was really an event for the doers and the engineers, right? The guys who are out there building scripts for at that point lab tech, and making those tools really work, as opposed to sitting in sessions like this and learning about sales process and things like that those guys don't really have an interest in.
No, right? And I think that's a good segue too, because that whole sales ops thing is really the tactical thing that is missing in a lot because we always think of the silver tongue when it comes to sales and we don't think that it's process. We think it's always just relationship and how do I have I'm thinking back to my retail days. What's your objection handling? What's in your toolbox of catchy phrases and sentences that you can use?
Right, right. I hate that. I logged onto a call and they were already talking sales when I got there, and they're like, "Oh, you're the last one here. We're gonna make you play sales guy while we role play and do objection handling." And I went, "Stop. I'll do it, but if we're doing objection handling, it means we already screwed up somewhere earlier in our sales process. So can we talk about that part first?" And I got a bunch of pushback and got everybody all riled up. But I'm a firm believer that, and we'll talk about it today. Your sales process is one of those things that should go really, really smoothly when you're good at it. And if you're getting a bunch of objections, it's a sign of a problem earlier in the process. So, it's definitely one of those things that we can fix.
No, completely. And this word or this phrase, sales ops, it's bounced around for a few years, right? But I think
Yep.
us as MSPs have always skated away from it just a tad because of limitations in our PSAs or even our own educational journey. And a lot of
Well, and
traditional
we also fall into the
organizations.
trap. Well, we fall into the trap of not building out sales at all, because up to $1 or $2 million, it's usually the owner doing it all. And he's like, "No problem. I'll just keep my notes on the back of a napkin, and there's only so much of it going on, and I can keep it all straight."
Exactly. And it's that whole journey too of a lot of us are owner led sales. I know when I did my MSP and you did yours, right? You're doing so much of the hustle till you get to that $3-4 million range, like we talked about on our last education session. And we forget that, oh yeah, I need to build a process. I just need to be good enough to where I can hand off some junk to a sales guy to where they can build out their process and start pointing out a lot of those limitations.
Yeah.
But
No, I
sometimes we
think
get
that's
frustrated when they point out what our limitations are.
well, or when we hire the sales guy and just expect him to fix all the things we weren't doing, right? So I think that's kind of the purpose of today, is to talk about the things we should be doing before we hire that salesperson, so that we know when they come in, we can hold them accountable, we can manage some metrics, we can have some expectations. Just over the weekend, there was the normal chatter on Reddit. What's your customer acquisition cost? How much does it cost you to get a lead? What is that lead really worth? And people are talking $9,000 and $10,000 that it costs them to bring in a lead when they're bringing in an outsourced lead gen company. That is a scary number for a five hundred
Especially when
thousand
they go
dollar a
and
year
just drop
MSP.
them a project where maybe you made $400 in hardware margin.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think as we talk about what it takes to really build a sales machine that can handle a $9,000 or $10,000 customer acquisition cost and make you profitable, we're talking about something that starts small, builds in the smaller MSP, and really evolves into something as the MSP grows. And that speaks to iteration too. It's not going to be the same process when you're charging $9,000 or $10,000, when it's costing you $9,000 or $10,000 to acquire a customer, as it is when it's just owner-led sales, mostly referrals, and you're walking into some pretty cheap opportunities. And when I saw that conversation on Reddit, I said, "Stop! This isn't a one-size-fits-all conversation. What does a qualified lead look like for you?" Because a $10,000 qualified lead better be 50 seats. It better be a lot of recurring revenue, it better be a sizable opportunity. If it's 5 seats at your local, accounting firm, you can't spend that for it. You'll never make your money back.
Well, and it goes into strategy, right? And we don't want to get too hung up on business strategy, but that ideal client profile could dictate what that opportunity is, right? At that accounting firm, most of them are small. We even saw that data
Yeah,
recently where 70% of the small business market in the United States is less than 9 employees. So there might
yeah,
have to be some acknowledgement that you may not be going after 25 user offices as much as you hope because you now are dwindling your chances or your at bats or your first time appointment type KPIs. You're almost now restricting yourself if you really go after some of those profiles thinking I'll get 25 users and your profile doesn't have them. So you kind of have to factor in how you make all this spend or how you use that revenue budget as we outlined a few sessions ago, right? That 9 to 10%, right? What is the best case? Even on Reddit today, I responded to somebody that was asking about buying Zoom info. It's a great tool to build out your list, but it costs you like 7 grand a month to build that list. And if you don't have a sales ops process, right? Like, what are
that
you going to do
hurts.
with that data? Do you have the KPIs built to go track the at bats, go track the efficiency of your SDR or BDR? Do you have all of that stuff in your wheelhouse to even take advantage of that? Or are you going to have a process that's almost even better than just simply looking at your referral network, looking at who is in your communities, looking at what your level of closing deals is even at to necessitate the $7,000 to $8,000 spend? Because I can tell you right now, if I'm spending that, I'm going to need at least 3 to 5 clients to justify a 1 year contract with Zoom Info, and that's pure MSP MRR revenue. That's not projects.
Yep.
That's not the foot in the door. Oh, I only sold them a BDR, because you will never be able to break even on that.
That's $1,500 to $2,500 a month in true managed services from each one of those clients
Exactly. So,
in order to make
we've
the
put
math
some
work.
stuff together, and I think really, Alex, you did this best at MSP GeekCon, and when you were presenting, I'm like, hey, we need to, I think, break this down.
I
You kind
got
of,
the T-shirt. Like you put my little banner in front of it, but I was rocking the GeekCon T-shirt today. So
oh, and you took it off?
no, it's still here. You just hit it behind my banner. Hold
Oh,
on.
yeah.
Where's my GeekCon
Sorry.
logo? There it is. Hold on, it's around here somewhere. There it is. There it is.
Oh, that'll be fun to cut. So
Yeah.
I think kind of going into this, right? We got our cute little heating up your sales process, because really what we want to talk about is if you're making these investments, guys, into bringing in your sales rep or bringing in prospecting tools, lead gen tools, marketing agencies, any of those aspects, we need to be able to have, just like we would with our engineers and our tickets, we need to be able to have a process to hold them accountable. And just like your tier 2, tier 3 engineer as a service manager, the best sales guy doesn't always make the best sales processes.
Yeah. And I always go back to the technical work that we do when we talk about process. So when do we build the process? Well, probably the first time we run through it. But it's not going to be successful if we don't continue to look at that process and dial it in. And this is the kind of stuff we need to do before we make huge investments in software, in people, in tools, so that we can, and in outsourcers, so that we can drive sales. We need to have that process so that we set ourselves up for success. And I think that's something that's really important. At GeekCon, I talked about the likening of the MSP sales process to Windows imaging. And when I go to lay down a Windows image the first time, if I get Windows and I don't have a blue screen, that's a success. The second time, if I lay down a Windows image and I get a blue and I don't get a blue screen, it's probably not a success. The second time, I probably want my RMM agent installed, and that's what success looks like. And the third time, I want to make sure that Office gets installed and maybe Adobe Reader, and maybe the machine gets domain joined or joined to an Azure AD domain. And I continue to pile these things on to improve that process so that my outcome is better and better every time. And that's what sales process is. That's what we need to build before we go out and invest in an outsourced marketer and a lead gen tool like Zoom Info and a whole bunch of things that pay-per-click advertising and all these things that cost me money just for me to burn good leads because I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm essentially going to walk in the door and get my blue screen in the middle of my sales process and get sent home.
So, Alex, for some reason that ain't working. Are you trying to tell me that the tool isn't going to make my company better?
There's that. Yeah. I'm going to quote Jason Slagle: you can't tool your way out of a problem. Right.
all right. It's everything that we deal with as MSPs, to where sometimes we think that the tool is going to replace the accountability, the strategy, the operational efficiencies that we have in our business. When, as my dad used to tell me, sometimes you just got to be smarter than the tool. Sometimes the tool is supposed to be an extension of our abilities, of our efficiencies. And if you can't do it without the tool, you can't do it the hard way. What makes you going to be able to think you're going to be able to do it the easy way?
And we've all been guilty of it, right? Holding people accountable is not fun. That's the hard part of this process, is making sure that the accountability happens.
No,
Anybody
it's
can
the
write down the
fail fast, learn
process.
fast
Anybody can
mentality.
follow the process. Yeah, but anybody can follow the process. Now, are we holding ourselves accountable to follow it and then go back and see what we could have done better or different and refine it a little bit the next time? That's what really kind of heats up that MSP sales process, right? We build it, we improve on it, we continue to improve on it, and it just becomes iterative.
Totally, man. Now, I don't know if we need to keep doing these intro slides. I think people know who we are by now. But for those of you that don't know who we are, my name's Kyle Christensen. I'm the founder of K7 Leadership. I've been working with MSPs, MSP vendors, big turnaround projects the last 20 years. And it's mostly through accountability and process, and really building out those tools to make sure that, hey, we have a strategy, we have expectations. And not only are we having those expectations, but just like the government taught us, or the military, you got to trust and verify at some point. So how do I make sure that there's discipline to keep that ball moving forward? And at the end of the day, right, it's really trying to take these things and at least try them, right? Don't just put them in place and knee jerk and remove them. A lot of times where I've seen success is that continuative iterations of, let me implement best practice and then tweak it to what I want. And then you got my buddy Alex. You're a lot cooler than I
Yeah,
am.
so I was an MSP too, and I had all the same struggles that most of the folks that I talk to today do. So, as a former MSP, I identified some problems in our sales and account management processes. This led to us building Lifecycle Insights, which has been acquired by ScalePad here in the last 6 months. But I've been in the industry over 20 years. My expertise really is in VCIO, account management, sales process, and those kind of things. So that's where I spend my time today. This
Yep.
is the
And
near and dear to my heart.
this is how you just built it entirely. As I'll say it, I know you're probably a little coy to say it, but this is how you built a successful exit. This is how you built a business in order to generate enough revenue to where, hey, we sold the right thing with the right strategy to the right people, and now there's an actual return on those efforts. It's not just
Yeah,
sell to, let to, walk out the door.
right, right. But my job was easier because I knew who my customers were and I knew where they collaborated and where they hung out. Right. I went to trade shows and I went, hey, those are my people. And then the trade shows got shut down, and I went, oh, my people are also in Reddit and on Slack and in these Facebook communities, and I knew where to go to find them. MSPs have a harder job because they have to figure out who that ideal client profile is and then figure out where those people exist to go get in front of them. So a lead is much harder to come by. That's why they're so expensive, and it's why it's so important that we don't screw them up when we get them.
Well, and at the same time, you're looking at building a lead where it's a 3 year to 5 year relationship. This isn't something where other companies, you can sell it and walk away. This isn't transactional anymore. This is actual relationship selling, relationship business.
And it's worse than that because today, unlike in 2008 when I became a managed service provider, right, when we went from that break fix to managed deal, and we had to explain to everybody what managed services was. Today, every person you walk into already has a managed service provider. There's no such thing as going in and explaining to a brand new customer what managed services is and why what you do is better than the break fix guy up the street. Everybody's already got managed services. They're in a long-term contract, and that impacts your sales cycle. You need to identify your ideal client profile, put together this top 50, top 100, top 150 list, and then start to build those relationships so you can learn who they're in a contract with, when does it end, what are the pain points that would cause them to switch at the end of that contract. All of this goes into that process, which leads us back to that quote that Kyle just threw up, which is me basically just saying sales is nothing but another process. And MSPs get all freaked out by sales. They think it's black magic. They think it's something that they don't understand and that they should be afraid of. But really, it's just like all the other processes that we're super good at. And if we just take a step back and say, at the end of the day, if I never say anything that feels gross and just go really consult with my customer, and eventually they'll realize that I'm the good guy in the room and they want to do business with me, that's what MSP sales is about. And so there's nothing there to be afraid of. There's no black magic that gets me to tell you, "Hey, Kyle, you're going to look really good driving that red sports car." Like there's some mental gymnastics going on that I'm convincing you're going to buy my IT services. That doesn't have to happen. That's not a thing. It's not a Jedi mind trick. It's
No, and it's
simply
not.
going
And
out
I
and putting your best foot.
And I'll be honest, it's one of those things I think I give the most advice in our community about, to where your clients don't care about how smart you are, the doohickeys that you have, the endpoints and technology you use. Your clients just need help leveraging technology to grow their business or to protect their
Yeah,
business. And that's all it is. All they want to know is, I have a problem. Can you help me? And I think so often we get so far removed from that that it starts to complicate the sales process, because now we think that there's these 90,000 things I need to teach somebody about in the sales process just to further my chances of not getting a no. And I think we become so
yeah,
afraid of the idea of receiving a no that we think no is gone forever. They're gone forever. And I remember, just Alex, you just said something that I kind of like, which was, right, you're going to have clients that now have managed service providers. And one of the things one of my account managers did so successfully when he was doing his BDR process was he would ask the client, "Hey, you have an MSP, you're happy with them, that's fantastic. When does their contract end? Do I have permission to call you when that contract ends?" And he would start to put reminders in his calendar to, "Hey, go call this prospect. They're not dead. Doesn't mean that they're not qualified. If they have an MSP, they're definitely qualified for another MSP," right? To where
that's
he
right.
would go, "Cool. I'm going to go ahead and set a reminder that in 4 months, 9 months, 15 months, I'm going to call this person and say, 'Hey, you still like them?' You do that enough. Eventually, they're going to go, 'Actually, they screwed up yesterday. Can we talk next month when I can renegotiate my contract?'"
No doesn't always mean no. No quite often means not today.
Yes.
And that's something that's important to understand. And that's where we go back to: have you identified your ideal client profile? Do you have a list of them? Are you communicating with them regularly? And that is the thing that sets up and helps you understand when to go in and start to roll a real sales process. So everything in your true sales process starts um, once the customer says yes. There's an opportunity for us to talk. All of that other, the building relationships, the marketing, the filling the top of the funnel, happens before this, before what you see on the screen. But what's on the screen right now is
I
literally
was to say, top
just
of
some
funnel.
really high
Can
level.
we talk real quick, high level?
Yeah,
What do you mean by funnel?
yeah. So a sales funnel, if you're not a sales nerd, right? A sales funnel is literally that, this thing that's shaped like a funnel, and we put a mass number of leads in the top, and the further we go down, the smaller the number gets, because we weed them out along the way. What Kyle said earlier, we get our no early and we move on. So if somebody says no at a particular juncture, we kick them out of the funnel, and the number of people who remain in the funnel as we work gets smaller and smaller as we work our way down from that right fit call to the stakeholder interview, data collection, confirmation call. The steps that are in my sales process. And we'll talk about sales processes and a few other options and a few other ways you could do this today, because this is something that we want to make super easy for you to build your own. The one that I have here, the one that we're using, probably isn't the right one for you. And you probably need to customize this to make it fit your business and how you guys operate. And I see that request, and we actually have some worksheets that you guys can use. So I just threw those in the chat, but we'll send all this out when we're all said and done too. But those worksheets in there have all the slides we're going to go through today, as far as at least the images that we're going to use to kind of rebuild this sales funnel.
Can I
But what I
throw out
was
one
going to say,
caveat
Kyle,
too?
was, well, let's before we do that, let's tease something that next week, in 2 weeks, sorry, on the 21st, in a couple of
Yeah,
weeks,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
going to come talk about how to fill the top of the funnel. So we're kind of starting in the middle today with, somehow I got a lead. Somebody wound up on
Yeah,
my phone that wants to do business with me.
yeah.
And
Just
I
for
think it's important
expectation
to
setting,
say,
that's great. Right? Because
yeah,
we are going to break down each of these steps of the funnels, guys, throughout the next few sessions. So make sure to register early for those sessions, because what we want to do is, if we tried to do a one call and go over every stage of this funnel, you would sit there just having overload. Each one of these,
yep,
you can find a consultant literally for each stage of the funnel on these types
yep,
typical matters. And the most difficult isn't the close, it's the prospecting. So we actually have a pretty cool guest that's going to help us. He's a master at prospecting. I'm so excited he's going to do this with us, because he's
yeah,
built some pretty giant companies. And at the end of the call, we'll announce who's going to help us with
yeah,
that. But
yeah,
I think another fair point that I wanted to point out, Alex, is that this is not best practice. Guys, the big thing when it comes to sales funnels is it's just a good practice. And I don't mean that to be a dick to Alex. I just mean this that we all have a client profile. And in these client profiles, it's going to change how you have the relationship with your clients and how you get them in the door and how they interact with their providers and partners to where your funnel might look different. You may have heard another coach offer a different type of funnel. None of this is right or wrong. This is a lot different than IT, where some things are binary and either right or wrong, right? Ones or zeros. This is something to where it's going to have to fit your style. It's going to have to fit how your sales culture is going to interact. We can show you a funnel that has been successful, and Alex is going to show you a fantastically documented one, but it may not work for you. The whole idea is this iterative improvement to where can you take this, try it, and whatever doesn't work or slows it down, or people have a higher rate of saying no, tweak it. There's nothing wrong.
Right.
But the big difference is the feeling of wrong when you only get one attempt to try it because you're so bad at filling top of funnel that I only get one attempt. What we need to do is
Our
expand the
first sales
attempts.
funnel, yeah, our first one at my MSP was like 16 steps. It was insane. And we hired somebody and paid them $400 an hour to help us build that. It was
Yep.
terrible. We whittled it down to 5, and these are the 5 that were actually actionable. And if you see these, you'll see at the top we have defined next steps, right? These are the things that we can't move on to the next stage in the funnel until we've achieved that with our customer, until we understand that piece of data, that piece of information. You have the stage itself, and then you have an objection, an objective, which is why am I here? What is my goal during this step, so that I can get to that defined next step? And so it's a pretty simple process. We'll give you some blank copies of these. Those are in the worksheets that you can download, and we'll also scribble on a couple of blank copies here in a minute just to kind of talk through this with you. But I want to talk through these because, Kyle, you're going to throw a couple different curveballs out here, and we're going to talk through it a couple different ways. But my process always starts with something that I stole the name of it from Nigel Moore over at the Tech Tribe. He calls it the right fit call, right? This is, I've got a prospect on the phone for some reason, somehow. I don't know if I had pay-to-click marketing or if they were a referral from somebody or if they just found me in the yellow pages. Doesn't really matter. Got somebody on the phone. I have to figure out, are they someone who I can do business with? Is there opportunity here? Do you have computers? Do you have enough computers? Do you have an interest in spending money to maintain technology? What are the things that help me decide whether or not this right fit call works? That is really why I'm here. Okay.
Yep. And in
That is my
traditional
objective.
sales, this is where you're qualifying the lead. A lot of time, this is where business development has happened. This is where sales
Actually, why don't we
development
flip over
happens.
to the whiteboard, because we can kind of talk through this right there, and we can spell some of that out. And honestly, that
Yeah.
image might be a tad clearer because this one's a little. Let's go focus in on that top right corner there. So if you guys look at this, this is what we're talking about. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I'll grab a red pen so you can see it. But we're simply doing all of our customer qualifying right up here. And I guess I need a darker pen than that. But so we're doing all of our customer qualifying up here. This is where we're saying, is this person a prospect that I want to spend more time, more money, more energy on? And are they the kind of person that I want to work with, right? This is the no assholes call, where we decide whether or not this is a person who I want calling my help desk. If we go to the left of here, our defined next step is literally get on their schedule, right? Kyle calls me. We have a 15-minute talk. He establishes he has a pain, a problem. I established to him a little bit that, hey, I could probably fix this for you. I'm the right person to help you. Does it make sense for us to come out and chat? Right?
And
And
I think what we
this
could
is how
do,
I
right?
move into my next step.
Oh, sorry for cutting you off, Alex, but I just got excited
Oh,
because
you're
I
good.
think this is the first time we can introduce a KPI, I think, into this, which, right, this is where you're
Yeah.
going to have touch points, which for a BDR, a lot of times is just how many phone calls, how many door pulls, how many at bats did you get to get someone from a lead to a prospect. There is a process that is a conversion. And this is where nomenclature in sales is so important of going, what is the difference between a lead and a prospect? When they're a prospect, they've been qualified. When they're a lead, they're just a name and number that you found in a list or someone gave you or a referral. You haven't had a way to truly qualify them. And this is one of those levels to where you can start to track this to make sure that right you're having those sales activities to say how many chances did we get and how many could we actually convert? Are these good lists? Are these bad lists? Are these bad client profiles? Or does our BDR suck? Let's be real.
So,
And then
so
going
you've said the phrase BDR twice. What is a BDR? I think we touched on
business
this a couple
development
weeks
rep.
ago.
Thank you.
This is a cold caller. You can call it anything you want. This is a person whose job is to go out and generate new leads, fill the top of the funnel, introduce your salesperson to people who might be a good prospect, and give you the ability to close.
Yep.
Right.
And then
And to Kyle's
also
point,
the
KPI
second
is how
K
many touches do we get to go after this.
Yep. And then the second one we kind of brought up was the number of either you can call them first time appointments, right? Or you could call it the number of SQLs, something to identify what that conversion looked like.
Sales qualified leads, right? SQLs are
Thank you.
sales qualified leads. So if we get out to meet with the customer, this is our first real, hey, I qualified them here. Now I'm going out to meet with them. My next step, obviously, is collecting data, but for here, I'm literally just doing a stakeholder interview. This is a Chartech holdover, right? They're the ones who really made this a key part of the MSP process, and that is we sit down with anybody who might be involved in the decision, anybody who might influence the decision. Maybe it's just the girl at the front desk who has the ear of the owner or the C-level executives all the time, but we want to sit down with those people, figure out where their pain exists, what is broken, right? Traditional sales was always about pain. We always needed to know if they had a budget for us and who was making the decision on the sale. In the MSP space in 2024, 2023, 2020, anything, you can't do this part without risk. So I made the joke at GeekCon that nothing's new in sales in the last 200 years unless you're an MSP. And that is, if you're an MSP, you have to sell with at least acknowledging that there is some level of risk and exposure that your customer has. We're not trying to scare them into buying.
Yeah, no
We're just
FUD
trying to
here.
be
This
very
is just
transparent.
this
No
is
fun.
just
No.
understanding.
Yep.
Honestly,
So
here's a good one for it, and this took me forever. And honestly, I should learn from this because I've cut you off now like 3 times, Alex.
you're
Is
good.
I every time I did a sales call, I wrote this literally on the piece of paper so I would stare at it as I was talking to the prospect. I would write,
Yep.
wait, why am I talking? In this stakeholder interview, and this is question based selling, which is actually where Chartech got a lot of this idea from, is I needed to shut the hell up and let my prospect talk. As much as the more they talk, the more information I knew about them, which means the better I could build a relationship with them. This is where sometimes you'll hear the 80-20 rule, right? In a
Yep. We,
true
we called it the
relationship building.
25/70. We did 25/75 at my MSP, right? I shouldn't be talking more than a quarter of the time in this meeting. And Andy says, can you please define risk in this context? And Andy, what we're talking about is when you sit down to meet with a customer and they're explaining to you how their business operates, where their technology pain is, we should be able to look at it from a really high level and say, that system over there, that thing in the corner that you're telling me about that runs the workshop out there, what would happen to your business if you were unable to access that piece of equipment? What would happen if that piece of software was unavailable? What would happen if all the data in that software was posted on a billboard on the side of the road? Because that's what ransomware is today. Those kind of conversations, we just need to ask the customer that and let them do a little mini business impact analysis and say, hey, what would happen to my business? What would that really feel like? And so we're not out here going, oh, you've got a CVE on a server that is a critical vulnerability. It's rated like this, and we got to talk all this tech nerd stuff. Like, if the words are fancy, you probably shouldn't be using them. That thing over there in the corner, that piece of software you explained to me, if that wasn't working, what would the impact be on your business? That's as technical as I'm getting at this stage.
Yep. And so from that relationship, right? And I call it relationship on purpose here because, right, we're trying to sell a 3-year contract here, Alex. What happens after that? You build the relationship, you talk it through, you've identified their qualified lead. What's going on after that?
Yeah, well, once we know that they're really qualified, we're collecting all the data that says, can I fix it? This goes back to we would like to hire a contractor who is competent, not confident. And so this is where we have the conversation with the customer to explain, these are the kind of things that we see all the time. Don't worry, I've seen worse than this, was one of my favorite statements to a prospect. We've seen clients in similar situations. And in our experience, they usually spend about this much money to solve for these kind of problems, whether it be one-time project, whether it be something that's happening in a recurring monthly service or something like that. But what have I done by saying it that way? Well, I've just established my budget and I've given my customer the opportunity to say, no, that budget's not good for me. I can't do that. And what is that? That's me getting my no early. If I get a no on budget, what do? I eject this customer out of the funnel or this prospect out of the funnel and I move on to the next one. So this is how we, again, whittle it down so that we have fewer and fewer customers and or prospects in here as we work our way down through the funnel. But if
And
I can
going back
establish
real
that I have a
quick,
customer, oh yeah,
I think, Alex, that's important. I don't want you to leave off of it because when you establish a budget and the client is able to quickly identify themselves out of the funnel, you're instantly eliminating yourself from having to be gross in conversation. The used cars salesman now, that approach can disappear. You can let that guard down because now I'm not trying to find ways to, do the old, how can I make you a deal today? And try to find a way to force them into your solution to where now you're already setting yourself up for the client to say, I can't afford it, or can you give me a cheaper price? And now I'm going to
and what did I
degrade my
not say?
service.
Yeah. And what did I not say? This is my favorite thing. What I didn't do is go to my customer and go, "What's your budget?" Because that sounds gross. It sounds like, Kyle, how much money could I charge you? And you would still say yes, right? And that feels like, that feels really terrible. Instead, I've said to my customer, "Hey, I'm experienced. I've done this before. I've seen this before. My professional experience tells me that there is a cost to fixing these kind of problems, and companies who don't see the value in fixing it have to live with the status quo. If the status quo hurts bad enough, we can fix it. And this is about what I've seen companies your size in your situation spend."
Well, and it adds a lot of confidence. There's a very popular model out there, more in the SaaS side of the world, but it's called product led growth. And the whole idea of product led growth is that you're so confident in your solution and your client profile that your product pricing and sign up can all be done on your website because either you're a fit and you're instantly going to know it by the branding and the marketing and the nomenclature I have on my website. And I think us as MSPs can learn from that because if I've gone through a great product lifecycle and development process and I understand that target market that I'm going after, then really you have to qualify a client out. Like you want to try to find any reason to not sell anybody sell something because either they're not going to be able to afford it or they're not going to understand why I do it the way I do it.
And there's also a little bit of exclusivity in saying, you know what, you're probably right. We're probably not the right fit for you. You'd be surprised how many of those folks come back if the next experience with somebody else isn't amazing. And they'll come back to you and go, "Kyle, I'm so sorry. I was cheap. I was wrong. I wasn't willing to spend the money, and I made a mistake." And sometimes people will qualify themselves back into your funnel by saying, "Hey, I made a mistake. I need to come back and spend a little more money than I thought I could get away with."
Oh, especially if they already have an MSP. Right? Because
Yep.
chances are the first time they hire an MSP, they went for budget, right? They were so price conscious because why? In the early days of MSP, we were a cost savings. We were cheaper than doing it yourself. So the only thing they looked
Yep.
at was, are you cheaper than me hiring a sysadmin? So
Yep.
now they're starting to go, well, our sysadmin took vacation, he took PTO, the cheap MSP dropped the ball 1,000 times, there was whatever. So why are you more expensive? That almost should be that lead into tell me
It's a
more.
great
Why are you double
conversation
the
to have.
price?
Right? It's a great conversation to have. And let's look at everything that we offer that they don't, right? And that's the opportunity to pull out their contract and see it all together. But if we're able to get past this point where we can establish that we have risk, pain, budget, we know who makes the decision, we can move ourselves into the next step. Before we leave this call, before we leave this meeting, our goal is to establish that stakeholder or that data collection. Now, I want to make a point here because our good friend Tom Watson, he used to work with Ninja. Um, Tom and I had a very good conversation about sales and all of this. Whoops, look at me dragging all kinds of stuff around. Tom and I had a really good conversation about this. Man, I'm breaking everything. They shouldn't give me fancy tools like this. Tom and his MSP combined these two steps. So, to Kyle's point earlier, sometimes in some sales processes, you're not going to need to have every single step that I have in mind. Some of you are going to have a different number of steps or some different and for your in your case better steps. But Tom would combine these two. I would set these two apart. I set these two apart because I wanted my customer to know I am not the guy who comes out to your office and crawls under your desk and fixes things. But I will send that guy out next week and he will come out and help us collect some data, figure out what's going on. And I say next week, but I would do these 5 things in 5 days in a row and have my sale closed in 5 days if I was really firing on all cylinders. So what this technical person is going to go out and do, they're going to do what I call the say, see, scan method. Right? So my 3 S's are say, see, scan. What can I've already talked to my customer up here. I know what's broken. I know where the problems are. Here we're going to go out and we're going to walk through the server room. We're going to say, hey, look, there's a blue 3-com switch in the stack. That's probably bad. We're going to scan the network with a rapid fire tools or a cyber CNS or whatever your favorite network detection and vulnerability scanning tool is. And now we're going to go out and we're going to scan, and that scan is going to help us validate the technical reason behind the pain they explained to me yesterday. And the magic happens when you can point to a piece of tech and say, this is creating the problem that you explained to me yesterday. Does that make sense to everybody? Because this is really where the magic happens and you don't feel like you have to sell anymore.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those areas too where you're bringing up Tom, right? Like at the MSP that I was operating, we also had a similar approach where we merged a few of these because so we had identified in our client profile that they didn't really want us poking around. They were legal, they were financial sector. For us to go and say, "Hey, can we go scan a bunch of stuff in your network?" The lawyers are sitting there going, no, we don't want you to get nerdy with us."
And Tom did a ton of work with attorneys, so he kind of shrunk all that down and did kind of the same thing.
And again, right,
So
they're mature enough where they knew that they had a budget and they knew what they wanted. They were just looking for the
yep.
relationship aspect. Do I like talking to you? Do I like interacting with you? So my data collection was really more of a presentation, kind of like that product-led growth model that I mentioned earlier, to where it was more of a presentation of how we operate and how we work with our clients and the roadmap of how we mature them, a lot more than, hey, do we look at the past and then just try to use that as a way for our in. And it was just a different process where I even had to incorporate some of our onboarding to actually aid in some of those steps. And I think that's where you can kind of really expand. And some people do two-stage funnels where the second funnel is really the post they bought your agreement stage, and right, how do you work them through an account management funnel? By the way, you will have multiple funnels in your company, so this is not one size fits all. But beyond that, right, I would tell them in the first 60 days, you're getting a QBR, and that QBR is probably going to say, hey, we're going to replace this. We're going to change that. We're going to have to upgrade your line of business app. And Mr. Customer, you can't be offended if I also find out when you told me you had 25 users that you truly have 35 users. So be real confident in the headcount you're giving me. And yes, sometimes that can feel bait and switchy, but if you set the expectation correctly in the onboarding and in your sales process, they go, okay, cool. Yeah, you want to build a relationship, start poking around, and then advise and consult with us on what our best course of action is, because we had so narrowed into our client profile to say, hey, we're the finance MSP experts. We know how to work with FINRA and SEC and big brokerage, and we know do not let your computers go down when the stock market bell rings.
There you go. There you go. And so, regardless of how you're doing it, if this is one step or two, you still have what do we have to achieve? Once we achieve our identify risk, figure out where the pain problems are, et cetera. That's your objective. How do we move on to the next step? We move on to the next step simply by scheduling a confirmation call. The confirmation call, in my mind, is super important. This is one of those things that flushes out any of those last minute objections that you're going to get at the close table. By the time I get here, I need to know I have 0 surprises coming at me. So this last step, my scheduled confirmation call, is simply us going back and verifying what we know, right? Verify our findings. These are from all of it. SACI scan. What did they tell me? Does it line up with what we found when we scanned and we poked our head around in the closet? We're laying out for the customer. We're reminding them, you told me this hurts. My engineers came out. They found out some things that explain why it hurts. We understand the scenario. We've seen folks in a worse place than this, and we can fix it. Remember when we talked earlier, we said that we'd be back here with a proposal probably around the $3,000 and $4,000 mark. This is what we've seen for folks your size and your experience who have the same problems you do. Well, Mr. Prospect, congratulations. I want to let you know I don't have the exact number yet, but we're going to be able to land in that ballpark. I think we'll be just fine there. Tell me, if I am able to come back and solve for all your problems in that ballpark, are we still good to do business together? Right? And this is me asking, are the people going to be in the room who are going to say yes to my proposal? Is this something that we can close when we meet next? Because I'm really trying to make sure that I have permission to close this deal when I come in there next time, because my next step is to schedule and present to all of my shareholders.
And I think this is a good place too to kind of confirm the budget, right? Like, hey, I think this is a good point to say, like, hey, as we've looked through it, right, we've already confirmed that we're probably going to be in the ballpark. So don't expect me to come in the room and not tell you, hey, let's get this relationship going.
Exactly.
And Andy asked, I just want to make sure because I think there's two good points in this. Should this be done for free? And I always struggled
Yeah.
with this question. So, Alex, I kind of want you to answer that first.
If you don't struggle with it, you haven't thought through it far enough. This is expensive. It takes time, and you want to recoup some of that cost. However, you can self-select a lot of people out of your sales process if you only charge for it. So my answer would be my favorite answer for everything in the MSP space. It depends. Where are you in your journey? Do you need every customer that you get in front of to close? Or are you able to be selective to only take the ones who are mature enough to pay for a discovery? And are you giving back something that has enough value that if they say, you know what, Kyle, thank you so much, but you're not the guy I want to work with, are you still leaving them with a deliverable that has enough value for you to have charged $2,500, $5,000, whatever your number is for this? If all I'm giving them at the end is a quote, then no, I shouldn't be charging for it. This is a sale. If at the end of this I'm giving them a risk report, vulnerability scans, an actual presented document of here's the things that we need to fix, why we need to fix them, how we need to fix them, a real strategic roadmap, then yes, we probably can charge for this. But don't get hung up on, do I charge for sales? Get hung up on, am I delivering something that is worthy of the bill that I would like to attach to it? And if I want to charge, let's adjust my deliverable so that I know that I can charge for it. We had two different billet versions of our output. And we would present this big, long, hey, here's everything. If you decide to become our customer, this becomes yours. If we're just in on a bid, then we're going to give you, the high level version of it with all the details removed. I'm not delivering you my chocolate cake recipe to steal from Gary Pica, right? I'm not going to give you my recipe, but I'll show you what's broken, what we think that we ought to fix. But that's a great question, Andy, because if you haven't struggled with that a little bit, I don't think you've really thought through this too hard.
And to show a counterpoint, I did charge for it because the way that I built my process, right? I would assume that, right, that CAC, that customer acquisition cost, if I was to have, because my MSP again was a little different. We had a lot of tier threes, not tier ones. We were a premium service for law firms and financial. There would be so much cost in adding a 10, 15, 20 hour discovery that it almost turned into having to have a smaller funnel. Because if I sent a $120,000 engineer to do a 15, 20 hour discovery, right, that's substantial amount of money to try to get a customer through the door. That lengthened my
And a
time
lot
to
of MSPs will
ROI.
credit that back. A lot of MSPs will credit that back towards the onboarding cost.
And I was actually just going
Um,
to say that is what we did
yeah, a
was if
lot of
they
them
if
will.
they really pushed and they really 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 wanted a hey, show us what you're going to do. We don't like the idea of it presented on day 60 of onboarding. I'd say cool. It's $6,000, and if you decide to go with us, you get then that credited back to your agreement over amortized over 12 months. Or
Yep.
I said, like, right, or I'll do it during the first 60 days. And if you decide to not go with us and you pay me 6 grand, I will give you, and I would give them an actual full blown project plan with steps on what we would take to get them back to status quo.
Yep. Yep. I think that's fantastic. And then, once we've made that presentation, obviously our goal there is to schedule this final presentation call with our stakeholders. So, what do we do there? We simply sit down and have the conversation with the customer. This is what the status quo looks like. This is what remediation looks like, and this is the cost associated with doing it. As we discussed, these are the things that hurt, right? We remind them of the pain. This is a little bit of Sandler selling, which you have to be careful with Sandler not to sound too gross. My rule of thumb is if it sounds gross, don't say it or find a better way to say it. But, Sally at the front desk told me she works overtime at the end of every quarter because she's doing stuff in spreadsheets that should be being done in your ERP solution, right? Let's figure out how to get that fixed. We've got wireless problems in a warehouse that cause people to have to do manual paperwork. Like these are the things that cause you pain, and this is what it would take for us to remediate it, and then here's the impact that might have on your business. As we present that, we're going through and reminding them of all the things that happened up here as we were working our way through our objectives. So each of these objectives comes back. We remind them that we had pain. We remind them of the risk. We remind them that they had told us that if everything was good, we had permission to close. We remind them that they told us what their budget was. And then as we get ready, we're literally going to, either close or we're going to get them to define the next step for us. I always like to tell the story about I took one of my account managers with me on a sales call, and there were 7 people in the room at a Catholic school that we were selling to, and we did the whole presentation. We had been through the whole funnel. We were pretty confident in our solution. And when I got to the end, I literally just said to them, do you want to make the decision now, or should I stand in the room or stand in the hallway and wait for 15 minutes? And the principal leaned forward at his desk and kind of looked back and forth across the table at all the people that were in the room, and everybody kind of gave him a little head nod, and he went, "Yeah, let's sign the paperwork." We
And
walked out of there, and the account manager grabbed me in the hallway, and he was as much of a Star Wars nerd as me, and he said, "What kind of Jedi mind trick BS was that?" And I said, "Ross, what was the worst thing he was going to say to me? Please go stand in the hallway for 15 minutes? Or no, I'm not willing to make that decision today," to which I would be able to say, "Great, you don't like to be chased, and it's not real fun for me to chase you. So when should we follow up to make sure, let's get a time on the calendar right now so that we can get a yes or a no, and I can either leave you alone or we can have a relationship. Just tell me. Nobody likes to be stuck in the friend zone. So, tell me where we are in this relationship." Right?
right,
And
and
your customers
I
appreciate that.
no,
Nobody
totally.
likes that sales guy calling, right? They don't like it
Well,
any
and
more than you like making the phone call.
beyond that, Alex, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all B2B. Most of the relationships we have as MSPs are with other B2B or service organizations. And we all understand that between yes and no is maybe, and maybe's hell. Maybe means I don't have data points. That means I don't understand how good I am, how good my process, my pricing. And if you communicate, like you just said to your client, like, I kind of want to know, are you going to, let me know when I can follow up, because I need to know if this is a yes or no, Mr. Client. I'm not going to chase you. I'm not going to make this gross. I'm not going to, I met all of your requirements, and right, I'm a little over your budget because of the data I presented, or I'm under your budget. Here's the reasons why. I just need to know, and I can't be afraid of yes or no. I honestly, I want to go for no for a lot of these situations.
Mm-hmm. There's a secret there in going for no, right? We push our customer to say, "Look, I'm a little more expensive than you wanted me to be, so I totally understand if you're not going to work with us." So, does this sound like it's outside of your reach? Is this something that maybe you can't afford to do? That is a direct poke and a challenge at your customer's ego. And if you're confident enough to do that, you'll be surprised how many customers come back and say, "Well, absolutely, I can afford to do that. What kind of cheapskate do you think I am? I need my technology to work." And as long as you deliver once you get in there, those experiences can be really, really good.
Well, and then as you mature a lot of this, right? And I think this is what's kind of going into the big actionable is then it's a recycle, right? Then you just go to top of funnel for the next customer. And now we can talk about increasing volume of right fit calls. And that is where your traditional prospecting and agencies and BDRs become now valuable, because I have a way to see how many got qualified in, how many got qualified out, how many of them got proposals, how many of them said yes, how many said no. Now I'm able to go, let's hire that rep, let's hire that agency, that service. Let's look at the sales
Well,
op and
let's jump in before we get there, though. Let's jump in and talk about what happens if I get an objection along the way. What happens if I get the big flashy yellow light in here or in here or in here, where somebody comes back to me and I'm just drawn over on the other side of that. But what happens if somebody comes in on one of these and says, "Wait a minute, stop. I don't think we can move forward."
ooh,
It's okay. We talked about it, right? We might eject somebody out of our funnel. But what is that our opportunity to do? It's our opportunity to go back and look at our sales process and see where we screwed up. One, could we have identified the no further up the funnel? Could I have spent less time with this person and gotten to know sooner? How can I go pick apart my sales process and see if I could have asked the question that got me the no earlier? Did I get the no because I screwed up? Did I get the no because I said something that didn't land with them? What is it about this particular sale that led to a no? And could I fix it in a previous step so that I didn't get to know that I got a customer who made it further through my sales funnel? I'm going right back to the blue screen. When you're imaging a Windows computer and you get a blue screen, something broke, I have to go back and figure out what happened in my script that caused the blue screen. An objection is the sales version of a blue screen. You got a blue screen of death from your customer. Now we need to go back and figure out what caused it and fix our process so that iteratively we get better every time. And failing to do that is super important, is super problematic. But so is failing to take my yeses back up through the funnel and say, what did I do right? What should I do every single time from now on because it worked really well with this customer? And that's where this becomes powerful, in that we go back and we add an extra thing, or we tweak a thing, or we say, hey, the way I explained that to that customer, that was the best way any customer's ever reacted to that. I should use those words again. And this is how we strengthen the muscle that is sales. It's not black magic. It's muscle. It's practice. It's repeatable. It is a 100% process, and I hope you can see that through all the squiggly diagrams that we've drawn up here today.
Alex, it goes back to what I said initially in the beginning of the call, where I remember in my retail days, we did role plays. We did a lot of role plays because really strengthening that muscle is how many at bats do I get where it's game day versus, hey, we're just at the batting cage. And while it feels dorky in the moment, I know that I saw I don't know if it was on MSP Geek or something, someone was actually using ChatGPT to do role plays. And he actually had trained ChatGPT to do objections and be a very difficult
Yeah.
buyer. And right, it gives you that ability to go, cool, did this work? Did that not work? Because it's going to be a lot more aggressive, especially in role plays, right? Because you try to go for a no, you try to screw up the person you're working with. And if
Yep.
you can get over that nerve, that cortisol response of trying to sell, which a lot of this is, right? That's the stressor that's happening in us from a chemical perspective. Now we're in a state of calm when these situations happen. And now you're able to reconcile and think of, oh, what's that way that I want to present this? What are the questions I want to ask? Do I want to make sure I remember what the client's telling me during the interview because maybe I forgot an answer and didn't write it down and now I look like an asshole during the presentation because I didn't remember what he had told me was his main problem.
Yep. 100%. And to your point, as you go back and start to now apply a service, right? Someone who helps you with lead generation, whether you hire a BDR, whether you bring in an outsourcer or whatever, as I start to put more and more in the top of this funnel, right? As I start to load this up, I should be able to start doing a math problem and saying, hey, of the people who make it to this step, about 30% of them will close. Of the people who make it to this step, maybe 45% of them will close. Of the people who make it to this step, about 85% will close and do business with me, right? And you should be able to start to do that math problem. You should start to understand what your average client spends with you. And what do we have now but predictability, where I can actually draw out my entire sales process and say, hey, if I have 100 people up here in the funnel, I'm going to close 30 of them. If I have 100 people at this stage in the funnel, I'm going to close 45 of them. And now I can do the math and say, basically, knowing how many inputs to put in at the top, I know what my outputs will be at the bottom. And now we can do sales planning, and we know what our revenue is going to be. Now we get into sales ops and revenue ops and all these other things that become the mature. Really, we're back to best in class at this point because most MSPs aren't doing this. But this is the thing that shows evolution of your business and an improvement in your business, when you can start to know what your numbers are going to be 3, 6, 9 months out.
Well, and this goes full circle into the conversation about who to hire, what to spend money on, how do I use my budget. If I have this level of predictability, I now know my time to ROI. So as a business owner, I can say, yeah, let's spend an extra 3% on sales and marketing because we should see a predictable return of that extra 3 to 4% in a time frame that I'm
But,
satisfied with.
but if I hire a dedicated sales guy before I know this, then I go out to Reddit and go, hey, I've got $100,000 in the bank and I'd like to hire a sales guy. Can I do that, or am I stupid? Right? And we see those conversations every day because people don't know the numbers. They want to offload this thing because somebody said delegate and elevate, like take the things you're not good at and give them to somebody else and let them do it. And we heard that and said, oh, I don't like sales, I'll just give that away. And we set ourselves up for failure. And I can't tell you how many MSPs have told me I'm on my third or fourth or fifth sales guy, and none of them work out. Salespeople are terrible.
No, and there's a right
And
time to fail quick, right? And I think we're all going to have to go through our own journey on fail fast and learn fast. But there is a level to where even you owners that are on this call, you work the sales process, you just don't realize you work it, right? You've learned how to build relationships, you've learned how to qualify, you've learned how to listen for certain things that you go, hey, this is why they close and they close with me. This is why sometimes the owner-led sales is powerful, because we've learned a confidence in getting a client to decide to do business with us. So there's some big aspects there. And even beyond that, don't overthink it, right? A lot of you guys are going to go, oh, I need a tool for this. I have to have HubSpot or Salesforce to calculate these KPIs. Don't underestimate what your current PSA has, or just Excel. You could easily build a sales funnel in a CRM inside of Excel and just track who your prospects, where they at in the funnel, to get to a point to where, hey, I know what level of confidence I have on converting a prospect or a lead to a customer. And it's
Yep.
baby steps to start justifying that level of analysis. To me, I'd rather spend the max amount of time or wherewithal into building my sales process before I go and buy HubSpot or Zoom Info or whatever expensive sales coach with a silver tongue is going to help me overcome objections. Because at the end of the day, like we went over, I think 2 weeks ago, Alex, I should be out of sales in the next, you know, 2 or 3 phases of my MSP. So why would I invest in my own ability to overcome objections?
And you don't need a fancy tool to do what we did here today, right? You can track this in a spreadsheet. I wouldn't. You can track it in your PSA. You can track it in the free version of HubSpot. You don't need to go out and spend a ton of money to figure out some of these harder things. You really can put you can put the time and energy into the right coach to help you get it done. And you can put the money into the right coach and put the time and energy into just solving for the problem. So I think there's a lot of value there. Both of our LinkedIn's look really blurry to me on the screen.
I
That's pretty
know,
bad.
right? Guys, we'll send a
We make
follow up with all this information
smart.
and the deck. We do have to start
Yeah.
wrapping up because I do want to introduce that, right? Obviously, you guys know both our organizations. For the most part, you guys hit us up on LinkedIn. Alex and I are going to be 100% there to have a conversation with you. This is really for the education, as Alex and I just love this community so much. That's why we were at MSP GeekCon and we're doing these sessions. The biggest value for us really is just to continue giving us feedback on these sessions, interact with our LinkedIn, because that allows us to pick the next topic. And in that, let's talk about next time. How do we fill
The
that
man, the
funnel?
myth, the legend. Yeah.
So for those of you who
Yeah. So
don't
if you
know,
guys
Adam
don't,
Slutskin, who is he,
yeah, if
Alex?
you don't know Adam, he was the chief revenue officer at ConnectWise before he was the chief revenue officer at Lion Guard and is now the co-founder at CyberFox. So Adam is a legend. He's built some big companies. He understands the sales machine and the sales math as well or better than anyone we know. So he's going to talk to us about lead generation and ways that MSPs can do some lead generation and ways that he's coaching MSPs to successfully do lead generation today. So we'll have a great conversation with him Wednesday, June 21st. If you want to scan that QR code, you should be able to get the registration link for that one because we're actually getting organized enough that the next one's scheduled before this one's over. That's new and different. Um, but yeah, Adam is somebody who has been a great mentor to me as we launched and ran Lifecycle Insights. But he's also just a great human being who gives a ton back to the MSP community. So he kind of fits in with us and our personalities, and we're looking forward to having him come with us on the 21st.
So, with all that said, guys, we hope you got value from this. We're going to go ahead and send out an email probably within the next day or two with this recording that'll be on YouTube to rewatch, as well as the PDF that Alex shared. So where you can start working out with your own sales funnel. And then, like we said, we're just going to start going every stage in the funnel to really dive into how to make these more successful, starting with prospecting all the way through discovery. We have kind of a fun one too planned for discovery. And then, other than that, guys, continue giving us feedback, continue showing up to these. If you register, that's our way of giving a KPI to our bosses and say, hey, there is a good reason for us to continue these education series. And other than that, we appreciate everyone hopping on.
Yeah, and if there's a piece of this one that you want us to dive into more deeply, and it's a big topic, even though we only covered a small portion of the overall topic. But if there's a piece of this you need us to dive into more deeply, just let us know.
With that being said, we appreciate you all.
Thanks for coming out, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.